I think a lot of people, especially when you're beginning, when you're starting out, I think all of us have made this sort of error, if you like, of saying, all I need to do is get confident. If only I could get confident, then I can do this thing that I'm scared of. If I just get confident, then I can do that pitch, or then I can finish the script, or, network like I'm supposed to, or do the audition or whatever. And I don't think it actually works like that. I think the trick is you have to do the thing first. You have to do the thing you're afraid of first and start that journey. And then, through doing, you get confident. When you realize that you haven't died and the world hasn't ended and it's kind of gone okay. 9 out of 10 times it's probably gone okay. Sometimes it's gone terribly, but that's another part of it. You have to know how to fail. You have to sort of internalize the idea that failure is part of it. Failure is part of the journey. You have to really internalize that sense that, you're going to fail, and that's part of it. And so that's okay.
And it's okay.
That's okay.
Yep.
That's necessary. It's more than okay. It's essential. You have to fail. So you have to the trick is to get the sort of head of steam behind you to do that thing that you're afraid of. The famous saying, feel the fear and do it anyway. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think confident people, when you're not feeling confident, you tend to think that confident people have annihilated fear, and that's how they can do it. They're not afraid. So that's why they can do that thing. It's not true. It's not true. I feel that nervous tension when I do a big pitch. Of course, I'm afraid, I'm nervous. But the trick is to be able to feel that and do the thing, still do the thing,
Yeah, and use that energy
and
in a way,
use it.
actually.
Yeah, I think you can get to a place where you can use. I read this thing. I think I read this thing. Sometimes I think I made it up. But I think I read this thing years ago where it's physiologically, it sounds right, so it must be true. Physiologically, what you feel when you're afraid is basically what you feel when you're excited. It's the same thing. You have adrenaline flowing through your system. You have that sense of nervous tension. It's the same thing. It's just psychologically. When you're afraid, you want to run away. You don't want to face it. When you're excited, you're relishing. You're looking for. You're seeing it as a challenge. But physiologically, it's the same thing. It's the same energy that's going through your body. So I think when you get good at something, I think everyone's been in a position where it's oh my God, this is an incredibly, I have to direct a film now. I have to do, or I have to go on stage. But you can convert that energy into sort of feeling like this is exciting. You can, psych yourself up into that space, I think. And so that's an important sort of strategy I think you can use. And that's certainly something I use to help me do those kind of, I sort of, when I'm feeling nervous, I'm like, that's great. That will give me the energy I need to make this pitch, for example, work.
I feel I started being a filmmaker in about 1980, 81.
Right.
Just before I went to film school, and then it was 2006 when I was making my first feature film.
Wow.
So, and a lot of that gap was to do with confidence.
Yeah.
So it took me that long to really get the chutzpah to make my first feature film. Strangely, I'd had a kind of what I consider a sort of a false sense, a sort of false confidence, or a sort of, kind of very ambitious, very, very, very sort of confident on the surface thing when I was at film school, where I felt that I was going to be the greatest filmmaker that ever lived. But I think we all go through that at a certain age. And it's very, 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 just very much on the surface. So
it quickly vaporizes.
It quickly vaporized halfway through film school, where I was criticized quite heavily for some of the work that I was doing.
Wow.
And I retreated, basically.
That's interesting. And why were you criticised? Do you think, was it because, when you reflect on it now, was it because it wasn't very good, or because you were doing something that was quite difficult and challenging to others? What's your relationship to that criticism now? Because it obviously knocked you back quite a considerable amount.
It did. Well, at the time I felt like what I wanted to do was really interesting and sort of meaningful for me, but my tutors at film school didn't agree. They didn't understand what I was doing, and I think their lack of understanding and kind of empathy with my ideas, sort of took me aback a bit. And I, however, I did have enough confidence to not give up. When they told me, I remember having a meeting about a film that I wanted to make there, and they all said, well, we don't really understand what you're doing, and if you want to go ahead and make this film, we're not going to support you at all. So I could have given up at that point.
Wow.
And actually, I didn't. I thought I really do want to make this film, and well, just to illustrate, I mean, it was a film. I was interested in fashion, but I was also interested in self-image and kind of female sort of kind of sense of self or lack of sense of self. And so my film, yes, I felt my film was exploring this. Well, it was someone who was obsessed with fashion magazines, a female character, and she kind of goes literally into the world of the magazine, sort of a fantasy, and discovers this world isn't as wonderful as she thought. And so I thought this meant a lot to me. But anyway, they said they wouldn't support me, and I still went ahead and made the film with help a little bit outside the school, and then they wouldn't let me graduate with this film until a couple of years after I'd made it. Wow, so
you really got blocked. That's really interesting.
But they, unfortunately, they got to me in the end, because after making the film, having the confidence to do it, I then had a kind of crisis where I thought they must, what they're saying must mean something.
Yeah.
And I need to go and make a different kind of work now. So I went into television. I stayed in television for about 12, 13 years, making work that I didn't really believe in.
Yeah.
But just,
and rebuilding your confidence.
And rebuilding my confidence, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience at school. The people that I was studying with didn't really like any of the work that I made, but that's just a part of the experience of art school. You put your work up and then you get critiqued until you can barely breathe, and then you go and redo it again and you bring it back. And so I got in really late. I didn't finish my education, my art education. I ran out of money, and then was sort of just drifting for a while, and got into acting by meeting a theater director and striking up a friendship and learning that plays weren't just books, they were actually things, because I wasn't raised in a very artistic family. I never saw theater when I was a kid. And through that, I learned something about what it's like to, for instance, not lose your confidence when you're just sitting in a room like this talking to people that you've never met. Being on stage, trying to make it clear what you're doing and feel it, and realize that if you're going to feel it, you can't be completely obsessed with technique, but if you don't have technique, no one's going to know what you're saying.
A couple of things that I've seen in sort of filmmakers who there's a couple of things. There's one thing where it's a sort of sense of entitlement. It's like, why don't people see how great I am? I should be being recognized for this, and that really can hold you back. I think that attitude.
It's not a good look,
because no one owes you anything, and in a way, to be humbled, you have to be humbled in order to. And sometimes it's helpful to be humbled, and think, well, actually,
that's
I'm
sort
not
of on
that
the
great.
other side of that. Often,
yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
The other side of being arrogant, because this question about self-confidence and arrogance. What do we really mean when we talk about being arrogant? Well, actually, being arrogant means thinking that your opinion, your view, is better than everyone else's. That's really what sort of egotism is, I think. So, and that's not going to get you far, especially at the beginning of the thing. Of your sort of career. The other thing that you made me think of is, I think you can, if you're really emotionally bound up with something, it sometimes becomes very difficult to see the way forward in a practical way, if that makes sense. I'll give you an example. I started off as a novelist, so I thought that's what I was going to do. And I had a hell of a lot, and this first novel went well, and it was sort of a sort of surprise, but I thought that that's what I was going to do. And then I had a hell of a hard time writing the second one. And it became, my whole soul was bound up in this thing. It was like, it was so overburdened, it became so over-important that actually when I found screenwriting and moving into a different thing, it was like a relief. It was like, I could actually have fun with this, and I don't have to be...
Because you weren't taking it so seriously.
It wasn't like this, my whole soul is at stake.
Yeah.
Like if someone judges this badly, it's like they're judging my soul, right? And I think if you're in that position, it becomes very difficult to progress sometimes, because it's like, you don't have the distance that you need to be able to go on the journey you need to.
I've experienced people who are self-saboteurs who often have that aspect, which is that no one gets me, but often they really struggle to present their work to anybody. So it's much safer to say, I'm amazing and no one gets me out there. But often they're kind of sabotaging themselves because they're not really showing their work. So it's in a way a sort of safe place to retreat to.
I wouldn't have made my first film unless I'd again, this is going back to the sort of lowering of expectations. I thought I was going to make my first film was going to be a big budget film. It was going to be shot on film, and it was going to cost, I don't know, $5 million or something. And this is back in, I don't know, the early 90s or something. And in fact, it was a huge lowering of my expectations, because I eventually made my first film on a Sony Z1, which is kind of laughable now. But I wouldn't have made it unless I decided, okay, I'm going to go and do a low-budget thing. But I hated this idea of doing a low-budget film. So yes, one's just got to sort of, in a way, sometimes just...
You mean for years you hated that, right?
Well,
you stopped
for
yourself.
years I thought my first film was going to be... I had very ambitious ideas.
Yeah.
They all needed quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it was only when I kind of brought everything right down to earth that it was possible to make anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, I agree. It's just about getting out and doing it. On, even if it's just on your phone.
I think that the first thing I could say is that sometimes being naive is a real blessing. Being green on some level is it's like worth its weight in gold. But it's funny, it went in reverse. My confidence began to erode after it went to air and people started to see it, and I would be walking down the street in New York City and some guy would come up to me and get right in my face, and I wasn't sure if he was coming on to me, if he knew me from elementary school, or he wanted to knife me. I mean, that went on for a while, and then you retreat. That for me was the retreat. I went way back into my head. I hid behind a lot of things that weren't good for me as an actor or an artist or as a human being. But I had to go way around the block to come back to the point where I could at least kind of see what had happened and try and pull some of those confident feathers out of the basket and use them again. And if I had known more what I was getting myself into in the beginning, I never would have done it. I would have run screaming and hidden, like for real. I would have left the country probably, or at least the state, and changed my name.
Look, filmmaking is, as we all know, intensely collaborative. So it's always about an interpersonal kind of relationship. So when someone in that relationship is either, kind of, and it's often about what we were saying before, about arrogance, about egotism. It's about, if you think about it, as we were saying, what egotism is, it's someone who believes that their viewpoint is above everybody else's, is the most important viewpoint. Then they're inherently fighting against a collaborative relationship, which is essential for making a film. So it's very, very tricky. Sometimes I think you have to walk away. Sometimes I think it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. If someone is trying to skew the relationship to such an extent, sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes there are ways, I think, of working within that relationship and finding ways to get the message to that person who's making problems. And, it's about being diplomatic, it's about being tactical, and all of these things that kind of are the fabric of working with other people. So, I mean, it can be incredibly tricky. I mean, as a screenwriter, I think in a way we're dealing with that stuff more than anyone, because we're in this position where, the director kind of helms the project. I was just thinking, no one cares about screenwriters. So if someone wants to talk to a screenwriter about the film, we're like, yes, I'll talk to you about it. So it's like, you're in this position where you're having to field lots of egos. You're having to field lots of people's opinions and viewpoints. And your job is to somehow...
Yeah,
and it's
you have to be really used to taking them on. You're expected to.
That's your job, and
Yeah.
it's incredibly strange, actually. It's a strange job, because what you're having to do is both manage other people's viewpoints, which are essential for making this film, and somehow, in all of that, hold on to your core vision for what the story is. Because ultimately, that's what everyone wants. Ultimately, that's what you've been employed to do, actually. What people actually want is your vision.
I've just made a film in which one of the major funders hated the movie, hated it. And I just knew that they were wrong. So there was a point at which the director and I had to kind of batten down the hatches and know that if we listened to these terrible notes and these constant, like, trying to erode our confidence that, no, that the film's terrible, you've made a bad movie, that, you know, with less experience, we would have probably got very drawn into listening. And actually, they'd have screwed the movie. And actually, we've made something really good. And we knew we had. And so because we had confidence in the work, and because we showed it to people that we trusted, other filmmakers, particularly, and that gave us confidence in the work, we could then defend the work and say, you're wrong, you're just wrong. And it got to the point where it was a massive fight to protect the film because we had confidence in the movie.
It's hard to remember exactly my state of mind, but strangely, it was very low budget, but there was a lot of time. I found that subsequently the budgets have got a little bit higher each time, but there's less time when you have more money. I don't really understand this, but we didn't have lots of backers, and we were doing it in a very low-key way, and there was no one saying, well, you've got to finish this scene, this time. And in fact, I remember one day I felt really, there was something, I don't know what was going on, but I didn't feel like filming that day, and we didn't film that day. But when it's not costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars for not filming. So it gives you a lot of freedom, actually. That's what I realised.
Yeah.
I wish I'd realised that sooner. But yes, in terms of confidence, well, I mean, I was, to a certain extent, making it up as I went along, because I was used to working in television in a very rigid, structured way. And I began making this feature film in quite a rigid way. I wrote it in a very conventional way and everything. But as I was filming, I gained confidence, because I realized actually where I feel most at home is in that shooting arena with people around me and making decisions very fast and collaborating and discussing. And actually that's what makes me feel alive. That's what I enjoy the most. Some filmmakers say the opposite. They like it when they're all on their own in the edit. I actually like it when I'm kind of communicating. And so I gained confidence literally day by day through the shoot, to a degree where I would just throw away the pages of my screenplay and just kind of make something else up in kind of in the moment. So that yes, I think again it's back to this thing of just sort of doing it, and then you kind of know why you're doing it, and you gain confidence through that. Mm-hmm. So then, and I realised after making that first film, well, I've just got to keep the momentum going, because if I stop still for too long, I might not make another film. I get a lot of confidence through knowing my collaborators kind of know who I am and where I'm going and my ideas, and that's very, very reassuring. So I kind of I'm creating a safe place for myself. Yeah. So it's not like I can just deal with anything now and I'm very confident and I can work with anybody. Not at all. It's kind of the opposite. So I feel it's quite sort of insular in some ways. Yeah. But what the advantage of that is the freedom and my freedom of expression. And I feel, well, I can't make a fool of myself in this group of people. And actually, I think it's really important to say, we're talking about confidence, but I think it's really important to express self-doubt, actually. And in this kind of group that I'm creating, I can say, oh, I really don't, believe in this idea, I'm not going to do this anymore. Yeah. And in fact, that happened in my last film. I lost confidence in some of the dream sequences I had for the film, and I very nearly didn't shoot some of these sequences. But it was thanks to my production designer and my cinematographer, who know me now quite well. They kind of stood up and said, no, you really should stick by those ideas, and do them. So that's a great point. So it's not about I must seem confident, whatever. It's not that at all. Actually, it's about yes, it's coming back to it, it's about confidence, but it's kind of a very grounded kind of confidence where you can say, I'm not happy about this, or I really... But
it's also, as you said, we all nodded sagely when you were talking about, that the safe place and the collaborators that I've 22 years into a career now, that list of people gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and I don't really want to go outside it very often now. And it's absolutely because of that. When you're doubting something, very often you need others who have confidence in you or confidence in the idea to go, you're wrong. And you can only, if you have confidence in their opinion, can you then feel safe to go, okay, I'm going to switch back to you're right, you've seen something in it. And that's essential, because it can't all come from you. It's exhausting.